Yo, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy Zeddy here, back at it again to drop part 2 for the amazing series of What If Deku Was Jiraya's Reincarnation. I got a lot of positive feedback from you guys on the last video. Not only that, but before the video starts, I am going to be checking the poll before, I start the actual recording of the real video. And so I'm going to find out whether you guys wanted Tsunade to get Slug Sage Mode or not. A lot of people actually ended up commenting that that's not a real thing, but come on now, bro. I mean, if there's Toad Sage Mode, there's Snake Sage Mode, there is Slug Sage Mode, and if there isn't, then I'll make it up. Come on now, like, easy work. That being said though, guys, I do hope you guys go on to enjoy the video. If you do, smash that like button and tell a friend to tell another friend. And with that being said, get strapped up, get your popcorn and snacks, because we're about to get started. Interesting. You may have to bring her along the next time you come over to visit Deku, as this is when Deku would say, "Bring her along? What are you talking about?" The Toads would then look at Deku and say, "Well, the next time you come back to Mount Miyaboku, of course." As this is when the Toads would basically jump down, as like the grandfather Toad, the one that actually trained Jiraya, would smack Deku across the head and say, "You have a lot of training to do today." When Deku would all of a sudden begin his first day of Sage Mode training. He would basically do a whole bunch of meditation, and Deku would hate every single second of it. Deku, however, would get some visions of when Jiraya did the Sage Mode training himself, and he would basically go off of that every time that he would try to do this stuff. After about 1 week of this, he would decide that it's about time to tell Katsumi about this stuff, seeing as the Toads were willing to maybe try to teach her something anyways. So Deku basically ends up grabbing a scroll. He ends up basically, sealing, making a contract, and Katsumi would grab her blood. This is when she would basically bite into her finger, as she would put her fingers onto the little scroll. This is when Katsumi would basically get teleported. However, she would have ended up getting teleported to a completely different location. It would be a place with trees and a giant sludge. So you may be wondering, how did this happen? Yeah, the reason she's not learning Toad Sage Mode is not because of, she can't learn it or anything like that. It's basically just going to be because of the fact that, well, put it simply, she cannot, she can't do the same thing, because it'll be kind of bland if they're both using Toad Sage Mode. So to do this, I'm just going to make myself a little bit of a plot convenience. We're just going to say that Deku ended up basically spelling the scroll wrong, and therefore she ended up getting teleported to the Slug Sage, place, alright? That being said, Deku would be teleported and wonder where she was, when Katsumi and Deku would both meet each other the very next day after Deku finally had to do his training. And he would say, "Where were you?" Katsumi would explain that she met these giant sludges and that they were actually quite nice. She would say that maybe she'll learn her own version of Sludge Shade Mode. And Deku would say, "Sure, let's do it together." Katsumi and Deku would both look at each other with a big old grin as they would say, "Alright, let's see who gets better at it." As it's at this point that Deku would look at Katsumi and say, "Oh, you're on." As he and her would basically do the Sage Mode training for the next 10 months. As they now are going to start doing the little Slug and Toad Sage Mode training for the foreseeable future. And this is when we're going to be having a little bit of a time skip. Deku would have ended up finally mastering Slug Sage Mode after about 10 months of working on it, complete mastery, meaning that Deku has the ability to tap into it on command. With one hand sign, Deku can tap into it. Not only that, but they would even teach him how to use a little bit of chakra. They would say that they saw Jiraiya doing a couple jutsus, and Deku would learn a couple of more things. Deku would have abilities such as the Rasengan. Not only that, Deku would be very adept in terms of shadow clones, and Deku would even gain one more ability that he loves to spam: the body flicker technique. Seeing as Deku has more of a lean build, Deku loves using the body flicker technique to get away from things and sneak up on people. So that's basically going to be Deku's favorite go-to technique. As for Katsumi, she would have definitely ended up mastering Slug Sage Mode in the complete 10 months. Barely actually being able to tap into it with the 30-second waiting time, and actually ended up learning a little bit of medical sage jutsu, because of the fact that, you know, the nature energy can be transformed and used as like a healing property, so she's able to actually heal things. That being said, on top of that, Katsumi, you guys are probably wondering, yo, how does she do this? She doesn't have chakra? Well, plot yeah, plot, I honestly can't give you guys a reason. If I was to give her chakra, people would get mad at me, so I'm just gonna say plot, and you guys are kind of just gonna have to deal with it, just because why not. After that, or no, not after that, but that being said, this is when Deku would finally basically proceed to be like, all right, well, you know, we did this, so what's next? As Katsumi would basically meet Deku again after months. Oh, sorry about that noise, guys. The other video that I finished rendering finally just finished. What if Deku was the Winter Soldier Part 2? In case you guys haven't seen Part 1, I would highly suggest go clicking on that video as well as watching Part 2. It's pretty dope. It's a Super Soldier Deku series that I think many of you guys would definitely love. Kind of similar to my What If Zedder was in My Hero Academia, so you guys are probably going to love it if you guys have seen that series. That being said, back into the video and enough shameless plugging. Okay, so as I said, Katsumi doesn't exactly have chakra, and Deku and Katsumi finally meet up with each other after a couple of days of not seeing each other, and by days I mean months. It has been literal months ever since they've hung out, and when Deku finally gets to see Katsumi on the day of the entrance exam, Deku would see her iggly bigglies, her jiggly tigglies, as he would see those massive jugs, and Deku would just be like, oh, as Deku would go in for a big ol' hug with Katsumi, pushing her up against, you know, himself. Katsumi, after feeling that, would immediately punch Deku across the face, causing Deku to have blood spurt all over the ground, as she would say, "You never change, do you?" As Deku would wipe off the blood and say, "Nah, sorry about that." As this one, Katsumi would say, it's fine, whatever. Just don't do it again, Deku." This one, they would both walk inside and take the written portion. After this, they would end up going outside to take the outside portion. And in terms of the Ida stuff with Deku fiddling himself and Ida calling him out, that never ends up happening. Ida basically ends up getting shut up by President Mike after he's like, "But what about the zero pointer? If this is an error on UA's part, then this is a big mistake, you know, yada, yada, yada." President Mike is like, "Bro, just let me finish saying what I was going to say." And Ida gets shut up badly. That being said, this is when they would finally both go outside, and honestly, they would end up going into the same area. This is when Deku would basically end up sitting down onto the ground and meditating before the exam, as well as Katsumi, and a bunch of people would actually look at them and stare at them quite a bit. Katsumi would get pretty angry at this. She would say, "What? You guys want something? You guys want to get pummeled or something? Look away." As the guys would just look away from Katsumi, and Deku would crack a big old laugh after this, as he just starts laughing, saying, "You never change, do you?" As it to this point that he would say, "You never change, Suna." As she would say, "What? What'd you just call me?" And Deku would say, "Nothing." As it to this point that Deku would end up saying, "You ready?" As he would start stretching, and Katsumi would say, "I was born ready." As she would immediately tap into her Slug Sage mode. Deku would do the same, except his would be Toad Sage mode. And it's at this point that Deku and her would pretty much use their immense speed. Katsumi would end up using her body flicker technique, which is a little bit of an imitation, not exactly the same thing, but she moves at such high speeds that it might as well be the body flicker, as she would end up going inside of the arena. And this is when President Mike would basically just give the people a little bit more time to get there. However, this is when about 5 minutes would go by, and Deku and Katsumi would have both quite literally ended up taking out like 30 no. You know what? I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that instead, it was about 30 seconds of President Mike not knowing what was going on, that Deku and Katsumi ended up starting wrecking robots. They started obliterating them left and right, and each one of them had about 20 to 30 points each respectively. Deku was destroying more and more robots, with Katsumi using her explosion quirk to spiral around, saying, "Howitzer impact!" She would be slamming into objects back and forth, not stopping, completely decimating the robots, and Deku would be doing the same, using Rasengans left and right, the body flicker, using a toad actually. Not only that, but Deku would end up actually summoning the Toad Chief when it came down to the zero pointer, because about 30 seconds afterwards, all the people were let in. And after, what I was just talking about, how they were destroying things left and right, it would have been about 5 minutes since then. Obviously, President Mike would have been like, those two have the right idea. Heroes shouldn't have to wait to be told to go. They should just go on command. Everybody would be pretty angry at that, but they would end up going in there. And this is when the zero pointer would be unveiled about 10 minutes later, after everybody finally started the exam. Deku, upon seeing this, would immediately summon his giant, most biggest, strongest card. He would summon the Chief Toad, as this is actually going to be Gamakichi, not the old one, because that one's like pretty much old and dead and dry now. So he would have summoned Gamakichi, and it's at this point that Deku would say, "Come on, let's go," as he would jump on top of him, and they would both rush at the zero pointer, as he would slice the zero pointer into a million little pieces, and Deku would smirk, as Gamakichi would say, "So, master, seems like you got some pretty good drip on," as Deku would say, "Yeah, I mean, it's some fandom merch." He would ask, "What's fandom?" as this is what I'm about to tell you guys about today's sponsor for the video. Alright, so now it's time to tell you guys about Fandom. Now, Fandom is an online merch store company that sells pretty much anime apparel. Anything ranging from My Hero Academia to One Piece, from Demon Slayer to Naruto. They have a bunch of options to choose from, and up on screen right now, you guys should be able to see a bunch of options. Whether it be Tokyo Revengers, maybe I might put One Punch Man, maybe not. Maybe there will be Jujutsu Kaisen up there. Maybe there will be, it's another anime that I can think of. Dragon Ball. Maybe Dragon Ball might be there. They have pretty much any anime merch that you guys would want to wear. They pretty much have it. And it's at a very reasonable price. Seeing as right now they're having a 50% sale on their already affordable stuff. So if you've ever wanted to get yourself some anime apparel, then I would definitely suggest going to Fandom. Anytime you guys go out there and you guys see a shirt or design that's from an anime like store-ish thing, they're always overpriced. See, a normal shirt that you'll find at a store will probably run you about $30. On Fandom, it'll be way cheaper. A hoodie? Don't even talk about how expensive a hoodie would be at a real store. And not only that, but Fandom does very good rates when it comes to shipping. So what are you waiting for, guys? Go shop at Fandom now. And with my code ZETHER, you can even get 5% off your order. So what are you waiting for? Make sure you guys go onto Fandom and copy yourself some merch for your boy. That being said, ZETHER out. Alright, so after telling Gamakichi about the sponsor, he would basically hop off of his head, as he would literally just be walking past a gigantic ball of flames and just ashes and everything. Not only would Gamakichi have done that, but the flames, that came from Katsumi. She came in with one of her biggest explosions and said, "Howitzer impact!" as she would have blown up half of the robot. And after that, Deku basically reverse summoned Gamakichi, as it's at this point that he basically went back and Deku pretty much landed on the ground alongside Katsumi as they both walked away from the flames looking like total G's. This is when both of them basically ended up grabbing their stuff and leaving UA, as they would have basically walked off like 2 blocks away. This is when Deku would have basically cracked and be like, "We looked so awesome," as Katsumi would just say, "I know, it was so hard for me to keep my composure. The only thing I wanted to do was start screaming yes, but now I can," as they would both jump up into the air and say, yeah. Deku's eyes would be locked right on Katsumi's chest, as she would say, do you like me to touch him?" As Deku would say, "What?" And this is when Deku would snap back into reality, when he would hear Katsumi smack the shit out of Deku. Deku would go flying into a wall, as Deku would say, "Totally worth it." As it's at this point that Deku would go home and say, "Alright, Katsumi, see ya, it's cool." She would say, "Yeah, whatever," as she would walk off angrily, and Deku would pass out. Now, this is when Deku would wake up the very next morning, as it's at this point that Deku would wake up to a message from Katsumi. Deku would look at the message as it would read, "Hey, Deku, we need to talk." Deku would answer back saying, "Sure, what do you want to talk about?" And she would say, "I'm outside." Deku would say, What are you doing outside?" as he would open his window, and she would basically climb in through it. This is when Deku and Katsumi would both basically begin to touch up on each other. They would start, doing the nutty, and some very unholy Christian things would happen. This is when Deku could hear his alarm clock go off, and he would just hear ding 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 ding, as he would wake up and say, Oh my god, it was all a dream. This is when Deku would throw on his clothes as it's finally now the day of UA, and Deku would make his way over to Katsumi's house to pick her up. This is when he would tell Katsumi if she's ready, as he would wrap his arm around her, and Katsumi and himself would just walk, and he wouldn't do it in some like a relationship type way, he would do it in like a friendly way. Katsumi would say, "Get off of me," and they would basically end up walking over towards the area which they are going to inevitably go. As it's at this point that he and Katsumi would basically end up just getting to UA, as they would look inside and open the door. This is when they would see the blue-haired boy who got called out, and Katsumi and Deku would both sit in the back. Katsumi would immediately put one of her feet up on the desk, as Deku would say, "Oh yeah, that's totally so feminine of you," as she would say, "Shut up, nobody asked you." This is when Deku would basically start cracking up, as Ida would stand up and go over to her. He would say, "Could I please ask that you take your hand off of this UA property?" As it's at this point that she would say, "Who put a stick in your cereal this morning?" As Ida would say, "Huh, how dare you?" This is when he would go to like start doing his karate chops in the air, and Deku would catch his hand as he would say, "Don't you ever put your hands anywhere near her again. You understand me? Or you're gonna lose this hand." As Deku would basically use the transformation jutsu to transform his hand into a literal saw blade, and he would hold it to Ida's hand. This is when Ida would have sweat drops going down his face, as Aizawa would realize this and end up waking up saying, "Alright guys, everybody calm down." This is when he would say, "Everybody to your seats." As Ida would go sit down, and this is when Aizawa would begin to explain to everybody that they are now going to be taking quirk assessment tests. Deku would basically just be like, "Alright, that sounds like it'll be fun." As, you know, he would give his instructions, say, "Alright, go outside." Uraraka would stand up and she would say, "But what about orientation? Wouldn't we miss it if we do this?" As Aizawa would say, "You're here at a hero school. You're not here to be told about how great you are or any of that stuff. You're here and you barely have any time to be transformed into pro heroes. You think pro heroes are made overnight? 3 years is nothing. If anything, you should be thrown into the hero course by the time you're 10 years old. But instead, they decided to make this a 3-year course. So sit down, go get your things and go to the locker room. Get changed and meet me outside." A true hero doesn't have to be told how great he is. He simply does what he needs to do. Deku would nod his head saying that sounds pretty good, as he and everybody else would go to the fitting rooms. This is when they would all basically get changed, as he would notice that Mineta poked a little tiny little hole into the wall to the girls' locker room. He would try to peek in there, however, before he could, Jiro poked him right in the eye before Deku had a chance to do a thing, and Deku was actually about to go do the same thing. This is when Deku would basically tell Mineta if he's okay, and Mineta would say, "Yeah, fine." As Deku would say, "Dude, you're a legend for peeking." Mineta would start laughing, and this is when Kaminari would go up to them, as they would have a little conversation, the 3 Muska perverts, as they would all go outside, and into this point that everybody would basically begin to be told what is going on. This is when they would all basically begin to take the tests, as Deku would actually be thrown the ball. This is when and Aizawa would tell Deku to basically throw it as fast and hard as he can, as he would say, "Your goal is basically to get the highest score you can." He would say throw once, as Deku has a little bit of a practice run, and it ends up getting about 500 meters, using nothing but his bare strength with his chakra in his hand. This is when Aizawa would look towards Deku's direction and say, "Alright, now pump a little bit more into it." As Deku would then say, "Sage mode." He would then create hand signs, as it's at this point that Deku would basically proceed to grab the ball and yank it back as he throws it as hard as he possibly can. And it's at this point that it would get about 2,769 meters, because why not? And everybody's jaw would drop straight down to the ground. They'd be like, "How'd you do that?" And Deku would just basically say that he doesn't know, he just kind of did it. This is when everybody would be just shocked and just completely in awe at the numbers that Deku just got on this little thing, as he would continue to go on through every single other little portion, and Deku would pretty much get Saitama-like scores. If you guys have seen One Punch Man and you saw the part where Saitama basically did his hero training stuff, his hero license stuff, then you could basically see that that's pretty much what Deku ended up getting when it comes to scores. He ended up obliterating everything, crushing the grip strength, obliterating Ida's time, doing the side-to-side steps even faster than Mineta by using the body flicker over and over and over, and Katsumi didn't get too bad either. He and her both ended up getting second place. This is when everybody would walk up to them and be like, "What's your guys' secret? You guys are like in sync or something. Are you guys a couple?" This is when Deku would say, "We sure," as Katsumi would say, "Absolutely not." And Deku would say, Well, she says not, but maybe in the next part she's gonna maybe change her mind. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. Maybe watch the next part to find out what happens in the next episode of What If Deku Was Jiraya's Reincarnation. That being said, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to click that subscribe button as well as hit that like button and turn on those post notifications to be ready for when the next video drops. That being said, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.